Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today is a divisional preview, and it's probably the bloodiest division preview we can do just because these teams hate each other with a passion. There's no love between these teams. There's just hate and maybe a little bit of respect. But to make sure I don't have bias goggles on this entire episode, my dad, Tony, is here to talk about this division, the AFC North, best division of football.
Eh.
Eh?
We have our favorites, and there's no doubt about it. And this division, because it's home to the Pittsburgh Steelers, is definitely your favorite division. I will agree with you that it is a very, very hard-fought division, and probably the division that is closest from worst to first when they're playing one another. But I think there are some better divisions out there, especially this year.
Nope. No one can match the every down, you're just going to get killed. But to start off, we are just going to go straight into this to the Cincinnati Bengals, who took fourth place last year. They probably don't take fourth if Burrow stays healthy, but Burrow got hurt, and that really affected their season. They never felt like they got off to a good start with him suffering a calf injury in camp. Then he suffered another injury and was out for the rest of the season. What do you think about the Bengals trying to structure this roster to help Burrow out, going with the draft and getting Amarius Mims to just try to continue build this offense line up?
Well, I definitely think that's what they have to do. I mean, over the last couple of years, they're contenders when Burrow is playing, and they're pretenders when he's hurt. So obviously, the most important thing for this team is to have him upright and playing instead of over on the sidelines. So going after Amarius Mims and then, going after Trent Brown and, free agency, I think are two things that are definitely super important.
So my question is, what are they doing with Orlando Brown Jr., Mims, and Trent Brown? You have a lot of big tackles that I really don't know if you can slot them into guard with how just massive they are. Not from a weight size, I'm talking height size. They're tall guys.
Well, fortunately for them, Burrow's tall as well. But I think, Orlando Brown's, your left tackle. Trent Brown's your right tackle. And Mims right now is backup for the right tackle. So, he's definitely a piece. Considering how many injuries their offensive line suffers, it seems like year in and year out, you definitely need to have some depth.
And that's true. And I'm going to save a lot of my talking points about Mims when we get to the draft discussion because there's stuff to talk about. But I look at this team as a whole, and something you mentioned today when we were discussing is they no longer have Joe Mixon at the running back room. Chase Brown, someone I was really high on last year, someone who I still am very, very high on, and I think the front office is high on him too for the fact they moved off Joe Mixon and didn't really bring in anybody else. How do you view the Bengals this year without Mixon, though? Because Mixon's been a very reliable guy for 5-6 seasons, it feels like now. What step do they take in the running game and also in the passing game, not having him to know what Burrow calls for his pass pro and all that?
Well, Zach Moss was brought in on a free agent, and he had a really good year last year in Indianapolis. We both like Chase Brown. He is highly explosive. The problem with Chase Brown is he still hasn't been able to keep a hold of the football, but when he's got it, he's pretty dynamic. I believe that that you like Trayvon Williams. Wasn't he a rookie last year as well?
He was a rookie last year, but I don't see him seeing the field over Chase Brown. I don't think he's
Oh,
there yet.
I don't think he's better either, but I thought you liked him, so it's giving you a little chance to talk about
I
him.
I did, but I think it's to the point where you're in. It's hard to judge based off what I saw as college film because we also have NFL film, and he just didn't play much last year, so it's hard to judge how that Bengals offense views him as a whole right now.
Yeah, but other than that, I mean, Zach Moss has definitely been around, but he's he's a good running back. He's actually got really good hands, and he's pretty well faceted so far as in the blocking game as well.
Okay, so the Bengals got gashed pretty severely on the run last year. Now they lose DJ Reader as well. Does that give you cause for concern on that rush defense?
Oh, highly. Um, like I said, when we were talking about the NFC North, I thought maybe one of the best free agent acquisitions all year long by any team was picking up DJ Reader. When he is healthy, then he is just amazing. They did go out and get Chris Jenkins. They also went and got Sheldon Rankins. So, uh, they're two different players, but they can definitely help plug where they need to. They're not going to be, I don't think, especially initially, what you've got with DJ Reader, but you know they couldn't afford him anymore.
No, they can't. And now it's time to move on to the draft class. And mainly the first topic is Amarius Mims. What are you going to do with Amarius Mims? He was a guy who didn't get a lot of reps in college, and now it looks like he's going to be a backup at the NFL level. Now, I don't hate him being a backup, and at one point I was all for moving him to guard. My concern is he is a bit on the taller side. He's a big guy. I don't know how that will translate to being an interior guard just because you need your quarterback to see. Burrow is tall, but it's hard to see over a guy who is 6'5", 6'4". Maybe that's coming from someone who's 5'9" and couldn't see him over on stilts. But still, a little cause concern moving to guard. I think you leave him at tackle, and you just got to get him some reps because that was a big issue with him on his college film is I felt like the traits are there, but the technique isn't, and he just needs a lot of reps to iron it out. And only so much you can do in practice and training camp and all that to get those reps.
He's definitely got great upside. There's no doubt about it. He's big, he's strong, he's actually pretty fast as well for a man his size, you know. But yeah, he's raw is such a tough word, but I mean he is. That's kind of where he's at, right?
He's like a
So
very raw egg. It may not kill you, but there's a chance it can.
wow, that's a pretty crazy analogy there. I have not heard that one used before, so way to go. But I mean, even when he was at Georgia, I know that you weren't super high on him, but I mean, when he was in, he was solid. It's the reason why he got drafted where he was at. So I think he just needs reps.
So do you think maybe they look to bench Trent Brown around mid-season or something just to get him those reps?
Well, to be quite honest, at Trent Brown's age, I would not be surprised if they've got good leads. They have Mims in there playing some too. I think it might be rotational.
Okay. Moving on to Chris Jenkins, you were much higher on him in the draft process, and to be honest, I wasn't his biggest guy. I thought he was good, not great, didn't pop a bunch for me. Solid pick, not going to criticize it, but you really like him, so I'm going to hand the floor over to you.
Well, I'm not going to say that he was my absolute favorite. I am very, very fortunate that my favorite my favorite defensive tackle in the draft went to my favorite team, right? So the thing is about Jenkins is he's that lunch pail guy, brings his lunch pail to work every day. He's not going to make mistakes, right? He is a really good athlete, but he's not that explosive athlete. But he will help plug that middle and allow the rest of your team to function, right? And the beautiful thing about that is that you think about it, so you got Miles Murphy, Sam Hubbard, uh, I just think that Chris Jenkins is going to be when he gets on the field because You still have, Sheldon Rankins and Zach Carter and BJ Hill. But when he gets in there, I think he's going to see the field sooner rather than later, and allow your edges to eat, I guess.
Well, he's going to have to stop the run in a very run-heavy division. To move on, though, Jermaine Burton from Alabama. Clearly a guy that was more talented than a third-round pick. Had some off-the-field questions, which had him fall the third round. The talent is there. He's clearly wide receiver number 3 on this roster. He's not better than T. He's certainly not better than Jamar Chase. But the talent is there, especially with losing probably T. Higgins this upcoming offseason. This was a very good pick, and it helps. Not only helps you now, it helps you in the future. McKinley. Go ahead.
So currently, right now, Trenton Irwin's the 3.
That will change. Most likely, I can't make a case for Trenton Irwin to be above Jermaine Burton.
And I do like me some Charlie Jones. I just had to get that in there.
No, of course you do. McKinley Jackson, nothing really popped for me on his tape. I thought he was fine. Nothing really made me go great for him. Eric?
No, he's just a body.
Yeah, he's a body. Eric All from Iowa. Iowa tight ends right now are so hard to judge just because the quarterback play is probably the worst it's ever been. Maybe including when they didn't have the forward pass. It's bad. So for me to say, well, he didn't do this in the passing game, I'm criticizing him for other issues that were not his own fault. I think he's a solid run blocker. I think he's solid if you throw him the ball. Will be interesting to see how he is in Cincinnati, considering the Bengals have been trying to find a tight end since losing CJ Uzuma. Don't know why I was going TJ Husemanzada there for a second in my brain, but it happened. Then we go on to Josh Newton from TCU. Fine, solid player, was really hyped up entering the college football season. Just didn't have a great season and fell in the draft. Tanner McLaughlin, I feel like I'm butchering his name. I watched a lot of Arizona games, so I didn't specifically watch his film, but I watched a bunch of Arizona games last year. Very solid player. Will probably make the roster if I had to guess. Nothing popped for me. Cedric Johnson, edge at Mississippi. This was a dart throw to me. He looked fine at Mississippi. He played in the SEC. Not really going to hammer on the pick. It's a body. Dijah Anthony, the safety from Mississippi again, keeping Ole Miss guys together, didn't do anything for me. I felt like he got burned a couple times, just not overall there. Don't really think he makes the roster, to be completely honest. And I was going through all these names because there was one in particular I really wanted to get to. Matt Lee falling in the 7th round. I don't get how that happened. Very talented player. Probably should have been 3 rounds higher in the 4th round, in my opinion. Will probably be the guy that the Bengals are going to be like, we got him late. This just pretty much certifies, hey, this day 3 pick, well worth it. Got some players in this team. Will probably make the NFL roster. I don't know how much splash they have. But when you have Joe Burrow, you don't need a whole bunch of splash. You just need guys around him that can protect him and can make sure he will get the ball in his hand to win the game.
So, I noticed you. Do you think Lee's going to make the roster, or is he going to be practice squad?
Roster. I'd be shocked if he doesn't.
Interesting.
And that's coming from a Gator fan who is not the biggest Miami Hurricanes fan. But I thought Lee was very undervalued in the draft and should have gone much higher, and I think the Bengals got a steal there.
Fair enough. We already talked about them picking up Zach Moss, Trent Brown, Sheldon Rankins. I guess the one we did not mention thus far in the free agent acquisition that's going to play a key role is Geno Stone. So it seems like the AFC North philosophy this offseason was to pick the Ravens' carcass.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what you do. You take from in your division and you make yourself better. I think that's one of the best strategies you can have for team building.
All righty. Well, I guess with that, we are off to uh, your talking points.
So should I just ramble on for the next 20 minutes and you mute your mic? I have positives, I have negatives about this offseason.
All right. Well, let's get to them.
Let's get the negative out of the way. Who's going to catch the ball outside of George Pickens and Pat Fryermuth?
That's a very good. Well, okay. Here's the thing, and this is what I told you already. Do you think Fryermuth's gonna actually be catching the ball? He doesn't really make a ton of out routes, and so Russ doesn't really, hit tight ends as much as one would like.
And that's a fair point, which is why, man, they need to make the move. And we're recording this on day 500 of the Brandon Ayuk saga. I might be doing a little hyperbole there. I might not at this point. If the Steelers can get Brandon Ayuk, I really don't have anything to complain about the receiving core. But until a trade is to happen, or if they were to get somebody else, maybe they go to the Texans, they look to get a Robert Woods or a John Mechie, that'd be fine. There's nobody outside this room, like receiving core in general, that you can say is going to have a good season outside George Pickens. Pat Fryermuth, very talented, has history of concussion issues, and goes over the middle of the field. Russ doesn't throw there that often. Van Jefferson, he is what he is. Roman Wilson is a rookie who got injured in camp. He has an ankle injury. I don't know how much he's going to play to start out. And then you have Calvin Austin, a guy who a lot of Steelers fans really think is going to pan out. I'm not one of those. I bought in the hype last season. I saw what he did. I didn't feel like he was all that great. He's a good deep ball guy. That's it. Russ throws a good deep ball. Maybe he'll catch 1 to 2 a game. But I don't see a whole bunch there. And you just look at this receiving core, it's not good. And I know a lot of people are going to talk about the Steelers' biggest issue is quarterback. I'm going to tell you now, as a Steelers fan who watched every single game last year, even the bad ones, and there were plenty bad ones, the Steelers upgraded quarterback. Whether you think Russell Wilson or Justin Fields is good or not, they can play to a little bit below average to average level. Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky were well below average last year. Mason Rudolph played at a little bit under average level to an average level. They won games. They won games big. This team's going to win games. Now, how that's going to happen, I don't know. I don't know if Tomlin's going to do some magic voodoo that's going to cast a spell on this team and they're going to win it, and TJ Watt's going to somehow get a pick six or a strip sack touchdown where he just rips the ball from the quarterback. Weird stuff will happen.
Well, I think what you have to understand is when you have a defense as good as what Pittsburgh has, right? They're very opportunistic. They're good for, a field goal or 7 points, several times a year. The problem with the Steelers' offense the last couple of years under Pickett, we did not see that last year, when when Mason was in, but under Pickett, their offense couldn't give them the needed firepower to get within that 3 to 7 points for the defense to do. I think that Russ and or Justin, I think they'll be able to stabilize the offense with Arthur Smith, and make them average. And really, with a defense as good as yours, if you have an average offense, you can do things.
So, real quick, before we just go into the draft, because that's really the talking point I want to get to, because I want to be positive and talk about positives. I think the biggest move they made in the offseason outside the draft is bringing Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen, you take from the Ravens, as you said, picking the bones of their carcass. And he's going to come in. He's going to be that linebacker. I do not believe he's going to have the green dot, which is very interesting because he had the green dot in Baltimore, did not do as well. As soon as they gave the green dot, I believe it was to a safety last year, if I'm correct. As you know, Mike McDonald's defense a bit better.
Well, no, the thing is with their defense is they didn't have a set green dot. It was week in to week out.
Okay. I think if you can let Queen be a more reactionary player instead of a thinking player, I think it's just better. Some guys, they can just see that ball, they go to it, and they just make an explosive play. I think we look at the Steelers, you have plenty of guys who can be the thinker, and mainly the guy who should probably have the green dot, and I will argue this till I'm blue in the face, is Minkah Fitzpatrick. I don't know if there is a guy on that team that picks up coverages better than he does and reads out the offense better than he does. He has a sixth sense for it, and it's pretty fun to watch the Steelers fan.
Well, I mean, besides that, you think about it. If you're a safety, you're seeing all the field, not, you're seeing where the wide receivers are lined up and everything else. So that's not, I mean, it's definitely not something that's foreign. Have been safeties that have called the defense. So, that wouldn't surprise me if it ended up being Minkah.
No, and now it's time to move on to the draft. And Troy Fautanu, I'm happy with the pick. Very happy. They are going to put him at right tackle. He suffered a knee injury in the first preseason game. All signs are good with what you read from reports. He will be the expected starter week 1. As much as I'd like to talk about Fautanu, you are a much bigger fan, and you probably still have a much more detailed notes on him than I do, so I'm going to hand him over to you.
Smooth.
That's fair.
Everybody thought initially, if you remember, coming out that they were going to have to switch him into guard because he's just a little bit shorter. But his arm length is good. His footwork is really good. He's stronger than people think. And his hand placement is just really, really sound, right? But the thing that gave him the most trouble was like those major bull rushes. I don't know, Michigan. But other than that, I mean, he is just a really, really solid player. I'm bummed. Like I said, he was one of the draft darlings for the Seahawks for me. But I love the fact that he's going to get to play and he's going to get to shine. And in that division, footwork is super important because you have a lot of good edge rushers. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I still wouldn't want to be him when Myles Garrett was, facing him, but he'll hold his own.
Now time to move on to the second round pick, Zach Frazier. Is there a more Steeler guy in this draft than there was Zach Frazier?
So I just need the record to show that I was much higher on Zach Frazier initially than you were. You were way too concerned with his injury, and I told you he was going to be a beast. And now you're all Zach Frazier.
Well,
so
hang on. There's still a center in this class I liked more than him, and I'll still say that. But he is a Steeler, and does the injury concern me? Absolutely. But he has looked good in camp. In the preseason action, he has looked very good. It does not look like the injury has hampered his speed. And is there more of a, kind of just overall AFC North player than breaking your leg but crawling off the field so your team doesn't have to waste a timeout in the final minutes of a game?
No, you are 100% correct. That oozes NFC.
AFC North.
AFC North. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Roman Wilson, liked him a lot. He reminded me a whole bunch of Tyler Lockett. Unfortunately, suffered an ankle injury in training camp. Don't know how much he'll be playing to start out the year. Peyton Wilson, I raved about Peyton Wilson for how long to you? Before maybe even the combine, I was on him.
Oh yeah, no, he's a stud. His thing, he's going to go as far as injuries allow him to go.
And that's very fair. And one thing I wanted to point out, and I just kind of want to steal this from Bootleg Football, EJ Snyder, when he was talking about Peyton Wilson, he said he doesn't know if there was a guy outside of maybe Caleb Williams or something that he had more notes on than Peyton Wilson. And I went back and I was like, okay, let's look through these notebooks. What draft guys had the most notes? He was top 5 of notes given because he was always in there. He was always making a play. He's explosive. He's quick. If he stays healthy, I think it's a very real possibility he is a third-round gem of gems.
And let's face it, the only reason why he was in the third round is because injury concerns.
Oh, yeah, and sometimes you got to take those risks if you want to get good players. Mason McCormick, a guard from South Dakota State. Is there concern of FCS to NFL level? I will always say yes. I think I've said that over every FCS player we've talked about. McCormick is a guy. He is a hand in the dirt, gonna just hit you. That's what he does great as a guard. He does have some athleticism, and he does know how to snap the football. If an injury were to happen to Zach Frazier, he could slot into center. He is used to calling out protections. As the guard at South Dakota State, they had a younger center. He was the one calling out protections last season. I overall really like the pick, and I'm really happy the rejuvenated offense line. That's been my hope this offseason, was the rejuvenated O-line. Now we go to Logan Lee. I think he's going to be a run stuffer. Don't really think he has many pass rushing abilities in his repertoire. Maybe I'm wrong. And Ryan Watts, I believe they actually moved him to safety or something. He's been playing safety. He's been playing corner. Kind of just trying to figure out his spot. Lengthy guy. Has some tools. Decent in man coverage. Do I think he makes a team? Yes, but I don't know how much that is because of his ability and how much of it is just because the Steelers' cornerback room is not that deep.
So when we're talking about cornerbacks, is Corey Trice still on the roster?
Corey Trice is on the roster, and I actually believe he's going to start the final preseason game.
Oh, wow.
Yep, they love him.
Well, we did too, but he's another injury concern, right?
Yep, you can jot that down for the Steelers' past 2 drafts. Talent there, but you do have concerns about injuries. I think that's going to wrap us up with the Steelers. Now time to move on to the Cleveland Browns. And, man, we can talk about a lot of positives. And I'm sure you're going to want to rave for a while on their defense. But the concern has to be there that the production that they have gotten out of their quarterback with the contractual investment they've made has not been up to par. And do you view this team as maybe being if we only didn't make that mistake at quarterback, if we just kept Baker, if we just did something different, this team could be going to the Super Bowl?
Oh, God, absolutely. Absolutely. But once again, we know how this goes. Ownership. This is one of those clubs that ownership drives the boat, right? Sadly. Because let's face it, I mean, they have done, the front office and has done a really good job about drafting players, right? I mean, they have really done a good job. And even acquiring players, they've done a good job. But if you remove that huge, just blemish, we'll be nice and we'll go there. So if you remove that blemish at quarterback and that contract and you kept Baker, you could literally be paying Baker $40 million a year and just letting him do what he's good at, right? And you would be in the position, look at the draft picks that you would have had still. So you would have had more depth on this roster, an already really good roster, but you would have had more depth on it. And I mean, you wouldn't have had the storm that was Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, it truly feels like Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski built a really good team. They got people to buy into the program, and Jimmy Haslam opened his pockets and ruined it.
Well, he saw a new toy and he wanted it, right? Just like a little kid. So,
I think a little kid has more restraint than Jimmy Haslam with some of the decisions he's made at quarterback.
I doubt that. Going into their defense, I like their offense. I think Stefanski is a top 10 coach in this league, but Myles Garrett, Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, he's been around, but he's always solid, right? I think bringing in Zadarius Smith last year was huge for them. And you can't really put 3 guys on Garrett. You can't always put 2 guys on him because Zadarius is still good enough to be able to get to the quarterback. JOK, I love him. I would love him to leave there and go somewhere rainier on the West Coast.
And he just signed a pretty nice extension.
Yeah, I know. I didn't say it was going to happen, uh, but uh, I love their defense, and I love how they're coached. They basically say, "Beat us if you can. We're going to gamble, but we've got the secondary that is going to lock you down." And for the most part, they do, and that allows their offense, almost kind of like, especially last year, almost like how we just said, that their defense is going to give them enough points during the season to where they're going to be able to win some extra games, but their offense struggled enough to where sometimes it just wasn't good enough.
Yeah, and it truly just, and I think we just hammer at this point still, quarterback is such a big thing in the NFL that you can do fine without it, but you're not going to go over the top without it. And it kind of feels like the Browns are going to be doing fine, and they're just not going to be able to go over the top.
Yeah, I know I've been higher on this team than you have. I think, like I said, you have a little bit of Deshaun bias and you have a little bit of AFC North bias, but I think that I don't think I'll phrase it this way. I don't think they have the quarterback on the roster to get them to the Super Bowl.
I don't think they have the quarterback on the roster that can get them to the playoffs, because at one point they were not going to make the playoffs with Watson starting. They didn't go on their run until Flacco came in.
Well, we'll see what happens, right? I mean, we always say, we don't really want to, we don't really want to wish ill on anybody. Do you realize that they have Siaki Ika?
Yes.
In their third string right now?
Yes. So here's a question before we get in the draft. For a team like Cleveland and a team like Pittsburgh, when you look at the deficiencies of quarterback, could you argue it'd be better for the long run for the bottom to completely fall out and they could get a quarterback instead of just trying to patchwork this quarterback room until this team ages out of contention, then you're back down to drafting high anyways?
No. See, I mean, this is a conversation you and I have had so many times. The rest of the team deserves to do whatever you can to win, right? If you decide to say we are going to just suck at the quarterback position and hopefully we'll be able to draft somebody, one, we've seen over the last 5 years even that a lot of the quarterbacks that are drafted high haven't amounted to much. So it's a crapshoot. Two, in 5 years, we'll use the Cleveland's defense, current defense right now. Where is Myles Garrett going to be in 5 years? Where is Zadarius Smith will be probably out of the league? JOK will probably, I mean, he'll be long past his prime. Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome. I mean, if you make that decision, you might as well just trade away all of your assets and try to stockpile. And that just doesn't work in the NFL.
I'm not saying they openly tank. I'm saying that the injury bug gets them and they all just start getting hurt and just piles up to the point that you are out of the race completely. And it's just better long term just to get that position secured.
I still think it's a crapshoot.
The Browns draft Mike Hall Jr. from Ohio State. I wasn't his biggest guy. You can maybe notice this trend. Outside of the top two interior defensive linemen, they weren't popping off the page to me to the point I was like, yeah, you got to take him. You got to take him. I think Murphy and Newton were in a class of their own, and then you had the rest of the guys that they kind of were all jumbled up to me. They could have gone anywhere, and I really would have been, it's fine.
Well, I think Hall had it right there for him to take hold of this past year, and he just didn't have the greatest of years, you know. So he did not rise up like, you know, Newton and Murphy did. So is he going to be solid? Probably,
But
but
a team that hasn't had a first round pick for how long? How long? Like for 3 years now. Can you just get solid out of your first pick? You kind of need to go for the swing here, and I don't know if it does. Now, Zach Zinter, the guard, is a different story. I think he was very good. Probably is the NFL starter. Not now, but will eventually grow into that role. I think it's a very good pick. In fits a bit more of Cleveland's offense style, which is a bit more run focused. Comes from Michigan from a run focused offense.
I like the Zinter pick. You know, there was a lot of talk that he would actually go later than that, simply because of his injury. But talent wise, you know, he's a day, he's an early day two talent, but because of that injury, he wasn't going to get that. So I do love that pick. I think that they hit a home run there.
Yeah, and like I said, when you don't have first round picks, you need to take these risks. And can they fail? Absolutely. But you need these big time hits because you haven't been able to draft this high end talent for a couple years. Jamari Thrash from Louisville, I personally wasn't his biggest guy. I thought he was serviceable, but never really screamed to me that he's going to be an NFL level wide receiver long term.
Yeah, I wasn't that impressed with him either.
Nathaniel Watson from Mississippi State, solid player. I don't see him seeing the field just because this Browns defense is very stacked. Wouldn't shock me if he made the 53. Miles Harden. Now, did you watch much of Miles Harden?
I've seen him on a couple of games, but that's about that. That was about it.
My biggest takeaway for him was he needs to be a nickel in the NFL. I don't think he has the ability to be an outside corner, but I do think you can move him inside and he can be a reliable nickel. We look at Juwan Briggs from Cincinnati. I really have nothing there. I didn't watch much of him, to be completely honest. I thought he was a guy. Didn't really intrigue me to watch a whole bunch of. Didn't really say he's an undraftable player. He was just a guy that I'm not shocked he was picked. I wouldn't have been shocked if he wasn't picked.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think the thing is for there is Cincinnati's defense has
Cleveland.
no. We're talking about Jawan Briggs, right, from Cincinnati, defensive tackle.
Oh my god. Can
Anyway,
teams not draft in the AFC North related colleges?
anyway, I think Cincinnati has had some really good defensive prospects come into the league over the past couple of years, and so I think they're going to get the benefit of the doubt instead of do we let him go and try to bring him in, or do we just draft him? Sometimes you have to just draft, right?
Yeah, and that's very fair. He wasn't someone that intrigued me, and I also think a big part of it is that Cincinnati team was really bad last year. Nothing seemed to go their way, and it felt like every player majorly underperformed outside of the pick game. Now it's time to move on to the Baltimore Ravens, and the Ravens, they kept their core together, but they also added a king. What does King Henry bring to this team?
Well, toughness, of course. Probably health at the running back position. You know, they have struggled mightily at the running back position to keep people healthy. So hopefully uh, Henry stays healthy because we all love him.
Yeah, and the issue is you are taking a risk because if age catches up to him all of a sudden, because I don't think with the play style of Derrick Henry, he's going to age. You're going to say, okay, he's clearly declining. That brick wall is going to hit. And it hasn't hit yet, so I 100% get making this investment. I'm not the biggest fan of going to make it big-time running back investments, but he fits their scheme, he fits their play style, and he does fit AFC North football. Now, would I have rather given Patrick Queen some more money than and maybe draft a running back high? My personal taste, yes, but I get why they did it.
Well, do you think that maybe they feel their window might be closing?
That is possible when you look at Lamar's contract because they will have to rebuild their team up. And you maybe are just going to look at, hey, this guy killed us in the playoffs when we played him. Maybe we can limit his runs and we can keep him a bit more fresh entering the playoffs and kind of rely on him. Because the big issue with the Ravens they had, especially in the AFC Championship game, they completely abandoned the run. I don't understand why to this day.
Yeah, I'm confused on that myself.
And if you have Derrick, let's say they do that again and you have Derrick Henry in the backfield, there are no excuses. There was already no excuses with how their team is built already. You don't give Henry the ball for that long, that's a fireable offense.
I would agree with that.
But I do think the biggest concern you have with the Ravens is Lamar Jackson hasn't been the healthiest quarterback. He's coming off an MVP season. He was really healthy last year. Was a big part of the Ravens doing so well, which can't be a big surprise. Do you have concerns of Lamar staying healthy in back-to-back seasons, which I don't think has happened yet?
Well, you just nailed it. It hasn't happened as of yet. And if you go back and look last year, Burrow was out, Deshaun was out, Lamar stayed in. Pittsburgh doesn't really count because they changed quarterbacks for a different reason. So last year was the first year in a while where Lamar was healthy the entire season, and it showed. What's going to be interesting is that they lost a lot of their offensive linemen, right? And so they brought in Rosengartner, and I think he's going to be good. I really do. I mean, another Washington player, so maybe I'm just a Washington homer right now, but
you are.
Yeah, I think that that's going to have to be a serious concern for them. Is your offensive line going to hold up, right? He needs to have some time. When he gets flushed and all he is going to do is run, there's a huge problem there for him. So solidifying their offensive line is super important for how this team is going to go.
Yes, and maybe that's a big reason why they brought in Henry. They couldn't really solidify the offensive line as much. So when you have a guy like Henry and you're going to maybe throw the ball or just run as Lamar, your eyes will go to Henry because they have to.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, you always have to have an eye on Henry. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. So here's the thing on their draft class, with the exception of their first round pick, because I'm not a Nate Wiggins fan. I really, really like their draft.
So the interesting thing is Nate Wiggins, and I like the talent there. I was okay with Pittsburgh drafting him if they decided to, and I'm okay with Baltimore drafting him here. He's very good in coverage. Do you have concerns about him being only 170 pounds playing the run? Yeah, I think it's hard not to, but the talent is there, and he's still very young. He can add more mass to that frame and probably just get bigger. You already talking about Roger Rosengarten. My bad. Talented player. Was someone I noticed while I was watching Fatanu. I find it funny that the Ravens and Steelers both took the Washington tackles. Adesanya Isaac from Penn State. I believe he had more production than Chop Robinson, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes.
Which is fascinating because it's obviously the reason why he was third round and Chop was first round is traits. But Penn State kind of just is a good team to rely on for pass rushers. They consistently put them in the league, and they've consistently been good.
They have this ebb and flow pattern. If you think about it, uh, they're either really good or they're really not. I mean, go back and look at the last few that they brought into the league. So uh, I think I think Adiza is going to be a good player. It's going to be solid for him, and that's what they need because they need to replace a lot of players that they lost. So it's interesting right now that they also brought in Chris Board from the Patriots. So Isaac is basically just going to be learning right now. So when they do get him in, and they do that well, they develop their talent really well in Baltimore.
So Devontae Walker, man, I don't really have a strong opinion on him because his Kent State film is really good. I didn't care for him in North Carolina. Maybe it was because the up and play kind of hampered his ability in my eyes. There was just something missing there, and he was playing obviously a better quarterback in Drake May. Maybe it was because of how the NCAA handled his transfer eligibility, was messed up to say the very least. He just didn't really impress me in North Carolina compared to his Kent State film. So I'm fascinated to see how this works out, if it's going to be Kent State Walker or North Carolina Walker. TJ Tampa from Iowa State. I was much lower on him than a lot of draft experts. I saw a lot of people had him going round 2, round 3. I thought he was a day 3 pick all along. Pick 130, perfect value for him in my books. What did you think of TJ Tampa? Because I know you're more of a cornerback guy here.
I had him day 2.
Well,
So here's the thing. I think he is going to be better than Nate Wiggins.
I don't. I very much do not.
Yeah.
Rasheen Ali. I didn't watch a whole bunch of him, to be completely honest. From my understanding is he's just a Baltimore Ravens running back that's going to do with what they like to do.
Yeah, which makes sense. Depth at that position, right?
Devin Leary. This pick confused me because this is the most opposite of Lamar Jackson I think a pick could be.
Yes, it is. That is
typically when you have a backup, you want them to play kind of like your starter. You don't have to change much in offense. And Leary's got talent, don't get me wrong. But I also, and I'm going to go back to the Walker thing, he was much better in his prior stop before he went to Kentucky. Now, is that probably because Kentucky's offensive line let him get killed every play? Probably. But he clearly just wasn't as good as Kentucky as he was at NC State.
Fair enough.
Nick Samek, I didn't watch him, to be honest. And I did watch Sanusi Kane. I really like him. They lost Geno Stone in free agency. I think Kane can replace him in the long run. Not immediately. He doesn't have that ability at this moment. He is still raw. He still needs to be developed. But Baltimore has a track record of developing safeties, and I think Kane has the traits you want to be developed in Baltimore.
So in free agents, Josh Jones, tackle, Derrick Henry, and Chris Board. We already talked about that. Their losses, and we had kind of glazed over this, but I mean, Patrick Queen, Morgan Moses, your starting center, Kevin Zeitler.
Moses was a right tackle.
Oh, was he? I thought he was their center. Excuse me.
Linderbaum's their center.
Gus Edwards, Geno Stone, Devin Duvernay, John Simpson, Tyus Bowser, Ronald Darby, not as big a deal there. And then quite a few of their defensive coaches, including Mike McDonald.
And their secondary coach, which is now in Tennessee.
Yep.
The Ravens lost a lot of talent, and maybe you can argue their biggest loss wasn't even on the field, but it was more in the coaching room.
I would 100% agree with that.
But not to hamper on this too much because we have other stuff to get into and we don't want to run long. Rookies to watch, for me, offensively, I put Jermaine Burton. I could have put offensive lineman, but it's so hard to give an offensive lineman this just because it's hard to watch. And I went with the guy that had the most explosive playability on the offense side of football.
I actually went with Troy Fatano.
Washington Homer.
No. Quite simply, he's going to see the field sooner than, say, Mims. And they have struggled. The Steelers have struggled at tackle for quite a while. So, and to be quite honest, I don't think that a lot of the skill position offensive pieces that were drafted in this are going to have a huge impact this year.
Which is very fair. Uh, Defensive Rookie of the Year, I went Peyton Wilson. I talked a lot about him when I was going through over the Steelers draft class. Just love the player. Love him. Think he's going to do great things.
I went Chris Jenkins just because they're actually going to need him to be solid to replace DJ Reader, and he has it in him.
Defensive MVP, there are two guys you can put here. I don't blame you if you take the other guy. I took TJ Watt. No surprise there. I'm a Steeler fan. Took Watt. You can take either Garrett or Watt here. There's no real argument to be made against either
So
or.
ironically, I have TJ Watt / Myles Garrett.
Listen, and I'm not getting the whole Watt Garrett debate because that's one of the most annoying things on social media. They're both great players. They're both going to excel, and they're both going to probably be a big reason why their teams wins football games. Offensive MVP, I think this ultimately determines who you have winning the division and what you think. I went Joe Burrow. A healthy Joe Burrow, in my opinion, is just the best quarterback in the AFC North, and he's one of the top 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL when healthy.
I completely agree with what you said there. The difference, I went with Lamar, and my reasoning is simply because it seems to be like a who's who, and his runs, his escaping, and he gets almost 1,000 yards running plus 3,800 yards passing, and he's going to get it again.
That's fair, and I think that's going to show in division picks of why we chose who we chose. To rally off the division standings, I'm going to give mine. I have Browns in 4th, Steelers in 3rd, Ravens in 2nd, Bengals in 1st. I just can't bet against a healthy Burrow. It just feels like a losing bet for me, so I'm going to bet on him. The Ravens, I think they're just going to finish 2nd. They lost a lot of stuff defensively. They lost defensive coaches. It's going to be interesting to see how they adjust. Steelers, Mike Tomlin has voodoo. They're going to somehow finish above 500. It's going to irritate me a bit that they're going to play themselves out of position at draft day, quarterback potentially. It's just going to irritate me. Browns, I have them 4th. If the Browns maybe had a backup quarterback I liked more than Jameis Winston, if they kept Joe Flacco, I'd probably have them 3rd. But because I'm not a Winston guy, I'm not a Watson guy, I don't really think much of DTR as a quarterback in the NFL level, I just can't put them above 4th place with that quarterback room.
Fair enough. We had a conversation today. So I'm going to read off, first off, how I originally had these standings a week and a half ago or so when I went through and started my notes tally. I had it Ravens, Browns, Steelers, Bengals. And then I got to thinking. And I really think that the Ravens lost probably more than anybody else did this season. And if Burrow is healthy, they try to solidify the offensive line. They've got some weapons. Lose a good defensive coordinator. They were in a lot of ball games last year without Burrow, so it was kind of unfair that I put them in 4th place. The Browns and the Steelers, I think both are good teams. I think both have similar issues where their offense is going to let them down, but their defenses are amazing. So I'm going to go Bengals, Browns, Ravens, Steelers.
So you have the Steelers taking last place in the division, which would be the first time since 1988, I believe.
Yeah, I guess so. I did not know that. Good fact though. Uh, Here's the thing. I don't think they're going to finish under 500.
Yeah, that's the issue with picking this division. You
They're
want,
also close.
they're all so close that one injury changes this completely. Burrow gets hurt, the Bengals are probably taking last. Lamar gets hurt, the Ravens are probably taking last. Myles Garrett gets hurt, the Browns are taking last. TJ Watt gets hurt, the Steelers are taking last. I think those are the four key players that, in order to win football games for these teams, those four players need to stay healthy, or else their season's done and over with.
I would 100% agree with that.
Okay. That's going to wrap us up for the AFC North. Up next, the NFC West, and then finally the AFC West. And we'll probably have maybe a little prediction show to set up everything. Overall MVP, Super Bowl picks, all the good stuff. Thank you everyone for watching. If you're new to the channel, I'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe. If you like this video podcast, hit the like button. And if you want to debate us, go down in the comment section. We're both willing to talk about disagreements you have with us. We are all fans at the end of the day. We all have our own opinions. And the beautiful thing about being a football fan is we get to voice them. So have a great day.